Well, Zuleka, it is a pleasure to have you today. And you know what? I'm super excited because one of the topics that everybody in corporation is talking about is about how do you create change in organizations. So what we know, Zuleka, is that in the last 2 years, 60% of companies have embarked in some type of change. Some of them call them transformation. They are changing their business models, trying to find efficiency through digital, or simply rebuilding an organization culture that is more agile, more entrepreneurial. A big part of the success of this transformation will come, of course, from the human factor that is created by a mindset and culture in the organization. And what we know is that despite investments in technology, trainings, and restructuring the full organization, often the human factor will impact the most in times of change. The key question, and the reason why I wanted to invite you, Zuleka, is because I really want to understand, can we really measure the impact of human in order to have the control of the change? Zuleka, we have been working together in a couple of projects, and I would like to introduce you in some words, and you correct me if I'm saying something that is out of the line. So you have 15 years experience in strategy execution. You have been working with big organizations, corporations that had a portfolio of more than $20 billion in terms of investments, and you have been delivering quite a lot of results, and this is quite impressive in different type of industries like real estate, hospitality, healthcare, and you have been working across different continents, Europe, Middle East, and today, in fact, you are the managing director of one of the most trending companies in the Middle East, the Cornerstone Advisory. I understand that the Cornerstone Advisory is unique as it targets the pains of transformation by embedding the human aspect in your strategy, and it's not all about plans with beautiful slides, but how do you engage people to drive the execution, right? And what I wanted to ask you, Zuleka, is what was your aha moment that made you transition into the world of consulting?
That is an amazing introduction. Thank you. You didn't get anything wrong. Thank you. I know you said we worked on a couple of projects. I strongly resonate with the work that you and the Bessern team do, because, while change is in that bigger vision, you only realize it at the individual human level. And that's such huge value to businesses. And I think in a similar vein, and this is why I set up the Cornerstone Advisory, it's so easy to set the strategy and the ideas and the pretty pictures and the beautiful slides, but on their own, they're meaningless. Unless, they translate into the business, they don't stand well on their own. I worked with companies and for companies that have had these amazing ideas of collaboration and employee empowerment, yet everything that was happening in the business contradicted that, right? For example, if you have this extensive hierarchy and these rigid processes, especially when you have a small company, right? There's no way for people to get together, sit and share ideas and live up to that idea of collaboration, and they're not being empowered to do anything. So, and that's why I set up the Cornerstone Advisory, because it's not a HR consultancy. It's not about people in that sense, because it's not one dimension. It's about bridging the gap between those ideas and the execution across the business. So in terms of people, processes, and systems, right? And just to get the most effective and efficient results for the business. And I think that's the most important things when companies are looking, especially when they're looking to implement some kind of change in their businesses.
Exactly. And what we have noticed in our own venture at Bessern is also that despite the amount of training that, like, companies in fact think that because you are investing in building skills And very often we are talking about the skills that are the hard skills that you need in order to drive technological changes. Because if we look at today's world, so what has happened that COVID has given a major slap to many companies in order to transform. The thing is that giving people just the knowledge about how to use technology, how to find alternative methods is not enough, because at the end, we are facing the natural resistance of human to change, right?
Yes.
Whatever happens to us when there is a major change, like we decide, okay, I want to learn a new skill. I want to look better and I want to go to the gym. We always have this natural resistance that made us, hey, I'm super motivated now, but the effort is so big that I'm not capable of doing it. So
I want to add to that point actually, Ivan, because I think you're right. Like, people will look at it with such a one-dimensional perspective. So they'll look at, oh, I'm offering training. Oh, I want cost efficiency. Oh, like it's just one. Like, you're not looking at the bigger picture. And I think that's why it's really important that we have these conversations that we're having today, because many companies will see a clear path in their mind. When they're thinking operational efficiency and cost reduction, they'll go, yeah, A to Z, done. But they don't really see that path in the same way when it comes to connecting people with those results or the bottom line. It's much less tangible, but that's where we know that that's where the greatest value can be added to the business, right?
Exactly. So to build on what you're saying, so more than having today more of knowledge, people in organizations, in order to thrive and enjoy the change, they need to embrace the change. And this is a lot of work into the mental capacity of embracing the change, having the capacity also to create a process that makes you continuously change, doing
and grow.
The transformation starts with the individual before it goes into an organization, because it's the individuals who will put the resistance for the major change that organization wants. And that drives me to the next question, in fact, Zuleka. How can you say, in fact, that a business, or what are the signs that a business are made to last and thrive despite competition and uncertainty? Because that's kind of the key words that are happening today, that there is, when you want to change, you don't know the results. Basically, and that fear of the future, and we know that human beings are really bad. They suck at forecasting the future, and when there is this uncertainty, we become less motivated, less engaged, because we have the fear that if we do this change, I'm not going to be capable of doing it. Maybe it means also that I'm going to lose my job, that I'm going to be replaced by technology. But it doesn't look like a clear cut for me, because also during this period, there was this major refocus into the human. And instead of finding technology to replace the work of human, it's about how can you use technology to enhance the work of human. And that has been a major change today. So for you, what could be these signs that something that when we do good change and is long-lasting change, we can do it?
You know, I love what you said there. We do live in a world where things are so fast-moving, easily changed, right? And when you come up with a new idea, it's not new for very long, right? We live in a world where ideas are replicated just like that. But what isn't easy for companies to replicate, and the bit that makes the company thrive, is the business structures and the business culture, right? You can't just pick it up and scientifically drop it in a different country, different company, right? I have my most favorite example. I've been following a company called Gravity Payments. It's based in the US. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a payment processing tech. There's many of them out there, as we know now, right? They have an abundance of competitors. But their CEO has what he calls a people-first approach. And that's a lot more than words. Everyone says people first, but it's a lot more than words. His starting point was, let's give everyone, regardless of their role, a base salary of $70,000, right? Because if they're comfortable and they're not worrying about paying the bills and paying the rent and, you know, surviving outside of work, they can, you know, fully immerse themselves into the job, right? And everyone thought, this is absolutely mental. This is not going to work. The company's going to fold. And you know what, Ivan, they tripled in size. They cut employee turnover in half. They've doubled their employees. But even through the pandemic, where most of their competitors were struggling, they've actually increased their revenue and they're thriving today, right? And, you know, I'm going to give you a complete contrasting example. And I'm sure we've all been reading about Wall Street and how they treat their employees. They treat their employees like they're replaceable. They've always done that. It's culturally, it's always been there. So they were working long hours, they self-sacrificed their personal lives, you know, their whole dedication was their jobs. And then the pandemic happened and everyone is reevaluating, you know, what am I doing with my life? Is this where I should be heading? And a lot of the very good people on Wall Street bowed out, they left. And now what's incredible is these companies, whereas before they were like attracting talent, they had so many applications and not enough roles, it's the reverse. I was reading, they're paying their interns insane amount of money to choose them over their competitors. And I don't necessarily think that's the right thing to do, because you have to change the whole business, the structures and the mentality that go with it, right? You can't just throw money at the problem, which I'm sure we will get onto. But like you can see the treatment of employees in two very different contexts and how it really will affect the bottom line. We always talk about the numbers side of change, right? This is not tangible, it's not a clean line, but look at these two examples in themselves.
Zuleka, I think that there is two good elements that you have mentioned. The first one is about the impact of the intangibles in terms of the motivation in order to drive change. So it is true that there has been research, in fact, research conducted by, I remember that there is a writer called Paul Zak who talks about trust in organizations. And he has been assessing the different parameters that creates that people gets engaged in organizations in order to give more. And of course, money is something tactical. It engages you just one shot. It engages you like for a couple of months, you receive a bonus because you have been working, or it is quite attractive to work for, I don't know, non-sexy industries like tobacco, like, I don't know, telecommunications. Sometimes it can be non-sexy, but it doesn't drive like a sustainable engagement so that you are continuously innovating. So the sense of belonging, the recognition that you get, and recognition, it doesn't mean money, it means more like somebody gives you a simple like ovation, like saying, hey, Zuleka, you did an excellent job, bravo. And you say it in front of others, your self-esteem is growing. You feel like belonging to a tribe. We all, the human being is built on aspirations that are super simple. And corporations during the 80s have been complexifying the situation, giving extra bonus, thinking that money will sort out the issue with motivation and productivity, but it's not. You work for somebody that you trust. You work with your heart, when you belong to an organization, when you feel recognized, when they give you the possibility to be the best version of yourself. Somebody who educates you, who gives you the development, who gives you the possibility to do things even that is outside the scope of your work, because you want to own, you want to grow for yourself. So that's number one comment that I have to do. The second one, and I'm sorry because I always bring back these jokes about strategic consulting, and we have been making a couple of jokes about them. So coming with the slides, so you pay, let's say, to Accenture, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, a couple of 100,000, or sometimes very often a couple of millions. for giving you advisory. They come with ideas, but within the next 12 months, these ideas are going to be old, non-applicable, because you mentioned the evolution is so quick, and the exponentiality of change is becoming even worse. So right now, for instance, human resources have this problem that's saying, oh, in order to skill people, I need to teach them new stuff every single month. No ways. You have
we have joked about consultants quite often, and we both worked for companies where consultants have come in, and I don't think it's necessarily always the case that things are adapting too fast for you to cope with, because I think that can be built into the company. I think what tends to happen with the kinds of the big consultants, they come in, they speak to just the leadership teams, right? We know that's just one perspective, or speak to certain disciplines only. They write their incredible deck that looks, very glossy. They give it to you and then they leave, right? There's no vested interest into, hey, let me get a broad perspective across the business, but let me also make it happen, Once they're paid, they leave. And so there's no interest in keeping it going. There's no interest in creating those structures that will keep the business thriving in a way that let's keep innovating. Let's talk and have all these channels and these mechanisms so that when changes are coming hard and fast at us, as is the current situation in the market now, right? We can survive. And the only way you can do that, Ivan, is by engaging with people. A pretty presentation that sits on a shelf isn't going to do that, right?
Exactly. And I think what really attracted me about the job that you're doing, the Cornerstone Advisory, is the fact that we think alike in the fact that instead of giving the fish and the rice to feed the people, we are teaching them how to fish, how to get the fish. So how to build this continuous, the skill capacity, the mental resources, so to be more innovative, to have it in use. Because when you have 10 consultants from McKinsey compared to having thousands of employees who are thinking the same about how can I do it better, even if it is micro improvements or even if it is a big disruptive change in the organization, they know better, but you need to entice them. They
bring that out,
and create the mental process to continuously think, how do I do it? How do I make it? And then this is when companies have the 10x, not the 1x that they get after a BCG presentation, right? So we had the opportunity to reach a little bit about the work as a strategic consultant, and also what differentiates, in fact, your value proposition, and how we find that the aspect of helping people, starting with people in order to do a transformation, can bring an extra value. And I forgot to mention, and I mean, a little bit off topic, but I just want to highlight that organizations transform not only because it's going to create additional financial value, but in today's world, the interest of the new generation of talent that they want to attract is hasn't put in the priority money. It is something else. It can be the sense of recognition. So when you look at the 3 topics that Gen Zs are going for, they have put in number 7 or 8 money, but what they want is work on their well-being, work in their development, being heard. So these are things, if we compare with my generation, Gen X, it's like, what the hell? We were worried only about earning lots of money.
This is true.
You cannot attract these people only having a culture that is based on incentives, in monetary incentives. So organizations that are based on that needs to change, create a new culture.
But also those monetary incentives need to change, right? Because you just said it, generationally, things have changed so much. Take the Middle East, for example, right? What you get as part of your package, right? You get education allowance, spousal visa, medical for your family, but the traditional things, right? But people are getting married later or not getting married at all. They're not having kids. They're more looking, like you said, they're more looking to align the company that they work with their internal purpose, right? We all want to feel like we're making a difference, more so today than in that monetary sense. So companies have to recognize that, right? As an employee looking for work, because obviously we all need money to survive. And, you know, the example I gave with gravity payments, you have enough money that you can focus and dedicate yourself to your job and to the company. But at the same time, you know that the company has a vested interest in you as a person. They acknowledge you, they like all the things that you said. And that acknowledgement is just can be as simple as a thank you. Job well done, right? So yeah, I think it's again not so tangible. Those things that make people feel appreciated.
Yeah. It is good that you clarify this point about salaries. Of course, if you are at an entry position and you are not paid well enough, then the basic needs start popping in. I don't have enough to survive. I don't have enough for food, and having a studio in the city, my life is going to be difficult. And this is quite important, that at least the basic needs to be covered. And then there is a sense of fairness. So it does, imagine that I come and I get X amount of money, then I discover that guys who are just, I don't know, because they are more popular, they're getting 20% more salary. When it is not fair, then we start, of course, we don't feel that we are not well balanced in terms of our capacity to be engaged. So engagement means starting with a price point of salary that is fair and that is comparable across the organization. And this is where, okay, this is a good thing to say the role of functions like diversity inclusion plays a big role to compare not only across gender, race, but compare across generations, if this what you are doing is the right thing. So we have been discussing about the positive things, but now I want to understand a bit more about what makes that an organization can fail. And there is a couple of examples, some we have worked on, some have heard of. What's your take on that, Zuleka?
You know, when we talk about change, it can be so diverse, right? The kinds of changes that we have. And everyone talks about transformation, like it's this really common buzzwords that everyone uses in every context. But at its most basic, you're looking at changing the business in any kind of shift, whether you're realigning or it's a fundamental change in three areas. It's usually operational, a core change, or strategic, right? And the goal is to but to actually change the processes, people, and systems in connecting the three to your vision or your strategy. And, you know, I think usually the starting point is cost efficiency. Like that's usually the starting point for all kinds of change. And so companies will, when they embark on a big transformation project or a change project, they'll think that if I change one discipline or one function or refine processes, you know, I make it more efficient, I do this nice Visio flow chart, and that's it. I'll give it to people and that's it, right? We change, we're more efficient, we've cut cost across the business, and that's great. What they tend to forget there is that one, disciplines and functions cannot work in silos. Everything interfaces with other parts of the business. And two, it is dehumanizing the business, right? But I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But because the other transformation mistake that most companies make is, here's a system, here's an ERP system that we got a great demo of, and that's also going to solve world peace. We're going to bring it in. We're going to bring it in, tell everyone, look, you know, we're investing in digital transformation, which is just a new piece of technology. And again, because they're not getting the buy-in from people, and I've worked with companies where this has happened, 12 months later, People have reverted back to Excel sheets because that's easier. The systems are completely underutilized, and it's effectively a failed investment, right? So going on to what is the biggest mistake is that element of dehumanizing the business. You know, you're saying that technology and processes are everything that you need, and that's it. And we know that doesn't work. I think the common quoted statistic is what, 84% of transformation projects fail.
Yeah, exactly. That's
and largely because of this. Yeah.
I think that you gave a very good example in terms of transformation, that and maybe we can dig a little bit more on that, because of course you made me think about times in my life where there was an SAP implementation. I didn't want to name them, but come on, I just have to name them. And exactly what you said, that there was a duplication of processes because nobody was onboarded. Somebody had the beautiful idea of saying to the IT department, go and map the processes and let's build it up inside of that software. So we had a lot of German people in my previous job doing some work that nobody understood and that nobody embraced because nobody was part of it. It was just like questions. Hey, how do you do it now? And I mean, I was not part of the solution. Nobody was part of the solution. And so what we are saying is that the way we build change today needs to be revised in terms that if you're going to pay more than $1 million for the implementation of a software that is going to be delivered in 12 months, then it's going to be too late. Things are going to be changing drastically. What if we find a way of driving change in a continuous manner? So embedded in the culture is saying, why don't we start with mini deliverables that have a lot of value impact? And it's not about the software. Sometimes it is just about the major idea of being focused on user experience, being focused on how we can create value to others within departments inside of the organization or to the customers. And sometimes solutions can be really easy to be piloted. And that's where organizations can learn a lot about startups, because in the startup world, you come with an idea that you think that is awesome, but in most of the cases, this idea is going to be revised within the next 6 months that you have launched your product, because you didn't know enough about the needs of a customer, or if you are capable of generating revenue on that. So this approach of working in cycles and having data to prove that your assumptions are valid or not, doing it even before you deliver a big ass development of a software, it is the best, because you are continuously doubting, but every doubt has the possibility to go and check with real data if your assumptions are good or not. Because marketeers, salespeople who are in front of a computer, they don't learn shit. That's let's put it that way. They only learn when they are in contact with their customers. If it is somebody in the organization or the customer is outside, then go and talk to them to understand what is their basic needs. And companies so have the possibility to use, I don't know, sometimes you call it the lean startup approach, and some companies have started creating this movement. But the core of this movement of making an agile organization is in the humans. So you teach them more of how to ask the right questions, how to create a process that can validate experimentation.
Yeah.
With experimentation, there is the concept that you need to accept that some things will fail, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's I love that example that you gave, because it's so commonplace. This team comes in and they ask you, how do you do things, and then they replicate that in a system. That is not digital transformation. That's not even humans augmenting technology. That's not cost effective. You're just replicating what's already happening in a system, right? The best people that know how to improve the way they work are the people that do it day in, day out, right? If you're doing exactly what you said, consulting with them and say, what are your key problems? What are the things that are your roadblocks or bottlenecks when you're doing your day-to-day? And then use technology to help resolve those problems, right? And so they're on board. Hey, my day is easier now because I'm not having to worry about X, Y, Z. I'm listened to and I'm heard, so I'm recognized and appreciated. And it changes the dimensions completely of a business when that happens, as opposed to one team coming in. This is your change project. You have to, like you said, that project management approach, step by step by step. And there's no iteration. There's no room for, well, if I listen to this employee and he's telling me that this change is going to create massive problems in another area, but I'm like, no, my project says that, you know, I'm at the end stage now, so we can't go back and rework everything, even though that's a fundamental flaw in that change project, right? And not listening to employees in that way, and not being agile enough, and not iterating or not accepting that there will be failures throughout the process is honestly a fundamental issue when it comes to change projects. And again, it comes down to people, right?
Another thing that, just while you were talking, I was thinking about that it is a major reason for failure of change is that we want to change when things are going bad. And what happens when things are going bad is that we feel that it is urgent to change. So we want to deliver more babies still in 9 months. So we think that if we throw a lot of money, we are going to be able to create a major change. And then people become impatient, because if you are in a problematic situation, a challenging situation, because you have been losing sales because you were a brick and mortar company, and now you need to go completely digital online because there is no way out. And you believe that if you throw money in 3 months, you will have a website that it will be fully functional, and you are going to kick out Amazon and the noons of the Middle East. Well, it's not going to work. And that makes that leaders become impatient. But it's simply not possible in 3 months to drive an impactful change. So start the change when you don't have any major problems. Start the change because it should be a way of living, a lifestyle for your organization, rather than a solution for a challenge that you have today.
Yes, 100%. And the other thing that I really like that you said there is, we live in the Middle East especially, it's, if we're going to throw money at the problem, those results need to be immediate. And no meaningful change project has immediate results. I know we were talking about the big consultancy firms before, but McKinsey did a study, and what did they say? They said you'll only realize like about 20% of the value of a change project in the first 3 months. Even after 12 months, you're still only at 70%. But we live in an environment where leaders think that because they've invested in that problem, and again, it's a problem, it's not a business as usual day-to-day approach where we're constantly trying to improve things. We only address it when there's a problem. But when I'm throwing money at the problem, that's it. Like, I need to see you have a project management timeline that tells me in 3 months' time I'll have you launched, therefore done. And again, it doesn't, and I've said this so many times during this session, but it doesn't recognize that even in our personal lives, change doesn't happen according to a timeline, and people don't embrace it in that way, right? We need to feel like we're recognized. We need to feel like we're rewarded. We need to feel like we're, you know, our roles are safe when we're implementing change. We need to feel like we're connected with the reason for change. And if those things don't come through with the change process, it's not going to be successful. But even when they do come through, it's not going to happen in 3 months. There's a steep learning curve for employees. I have to do my day job and deal with this change, right? And there's going to be less of productivity during this period. But then senior management are saying, well, wait, I threw money at this problem, but you're now not being productive. But we're learning to deal with the change. We're trying to implement the change, right?
And it's a nice transition of what you just mentioned to talk a little bit more about the human. So, so we have been talking about change, how difficult it is. And one thing that is that has struck me is that during COVID times, there is a measure of the productivity that we call presenteeism, which is basically the idea that people either shows up at work without having the level of productivity that is expected, because they are just coming, even though mentally they are anxious, stressed. Imagine the anxiety. I mean, I don't have to tell you, imagine, because we have been through of changing, working from home, and not having enough connection with your peers, being afraid that people that shows up to the physical office, they are going to know more than you, and you have to go anyways. You need to create mental processes to enhance your efficiency when you're working from home, and then you have your 7 years old who will come with a homework, your wife who will tell you, now that you're here, can you help more? Finally.
I see you.
So you need to deal with a lot of changes, and it is, humans not take it. I mean, that generates stress, and stress is a signal for our body of saying it is a situation where I'm fearful. And when you have the production of chemicals in your brain of fear, then there is a decrease of your cognitive, that means the thinking process that you have. So you are not basically as clever as you were, because when you are stressed, you are blocking the same molecules, the same hormones, signals of your brain that are creating the level of stress are blocking your innovation, your capacity to do connections inside different areas of your brain. It is blocking your the 5%, in fact, of the brain that is doing all the analytical thinking. It is blocking all this communication. So you become, it's a little bit like you are frozen in front of the computer. So you want to be there, but you are not doing enough. And you feel also bad because you notice it, that things that were like, I'm going to put on a strategy or a presentation or crunch some numbers that were taking you 20 minutes or 1 hour. When you are stressed, it will take you a couple of hours, and you feel it, and you feel bad about yourself. So this idea of working within the human psychology in order to create this mindset of how do I get out of this circle of stress, having more the control of feeling that you are having more of control of your life, so that you can be more productive, creative, and own your life. Because that's the major thing. When you don't feel that you own your life, this is something that where people are wanting to leave their jobs. And we are seeing the impact of COVID today, because people are feeling that, what's the point? Where is my purpose? I don't want to be 15 and still crunching Excel numbers. Well, I still do.
But I mean, I think, but that is such a crucial point, though, because I mean, I mentioned earlier, like safety, connectivity, and reward. But if you remove those barriers that make people feel unsafe and unconnected and unrecognized and unrewarded, then it makes change a lot easier to implement. Like when, you know, in the context of change, you're scrutinizing my work, right? Reevaluating the way I work, there's the human factor is me stressing, saying, but I've been doing this job this whole time and I've gotten it done. And now you're looking at it and telling me it's been wrong this whole time and there's a better way of doing it. Humans feel like it's a personal attack, right? And especially when, like, a lot of digital transformation projects look at this real-time dashboarding and reporting, right? Suddenly there's this extreme scrutiny on what I'm doing. And, you know, so it makes people feel vulnerable, right? If you change the narrative, but it's true, right? But if you change the narrative to say, well, this isn't an attack on you, I'm here to make your job easier, right? How do I do that? And then that's when you bring them on board, and they feel like they are part of the solution, right? And it removes those barriers to suddenly I feel unsafe. I mean, it's not too different from the remote working to the office, right? if you, I mean, that's a whole different conversation in itself, but if you give people the tools to still collaborate and feel okay, whether they're in the office or at home, right? And then they're productive, right? If I'm distracted the whole time when I'm in the office because I'm worrying about X, Y, Z, I'm not productive. And that is no different to when I'm at home and I'm stressed about, you know, all these other things that are happening in my life. So there has to be a whole solution, you know?
And talking about this solution, and we very often forget it because of the rush of changing, transforming an organization, is that as humans, we value autonomy. So that means that I decide how to do my stuff. That we are not micromanaged. And what happens very often in times of change, that our autonomy is removed because we replace it by the external consultants or by someone who is working in a weird department that we didn't know, that we call it transformational change, who will tell me, as of now, you should be doing in this way, the new approach. And I wasn't part of the decision making. I didn't contribute. I didn't co-create the change. So my level of engagement is going to be dripping. Then mastery. So the possibility for me to learn continuously, so that I'm not part of a machine of the change that is I have to repeat 10 million times, but I have the possibility to do something that is continuous, slightly more challenging of what I used to do before. So that I feel like I'm owning the thing, is where I can enjoy what I'm doing because it's not repetitive so that it becomes boring and less attractive for me, but it's not challenging that I cannot completely not do it because it's out of my competency set. And the last thing, which you have mentioned also, is about the sense of purpose. Why are we doing the change? If it is about doing the change to have extra revenues, doing the change, communicating the change, in fact, to have to grow, why is it important for me as an individual? Is it something where I feel related? So if we don't have these three elements that develop, I call it intrinsic motivation. This motivation that comes from within is not because I'm paid a lot, but more is something that I want to give, and it becomes again, I'm going to use the word, my lifestyle. If I don't have autonomy, mastery, and purpose in what I do, then I'm not going to be part of the change. And I'm going to be like a passive resistant for the change that is happening, because it belongs to some people who are up there in the senior management team, and sometimes they might not be the ones who are role modeling the change, because change is about having a different mentality. But these guys, they are 50 plus, and they're demonstrating that they live the old ways.
Such a great point that you've made there as well, Ivan, because, you know, you said this passive resistance to change. Sometimes it can be an active resistance to change. I mean, there's another commonly quoted statistic that says, no matter what change project, about 5% of people will never be on board with the change, right? For whatever reasons. It's not something that you're going to be able to solve, right? I mean, let's be real. There are very many people that want to align their work with their purpose, et cetera, et cetera. There are other people that have very different mindsets and different priorities, right? I want to come to my own job and do what I've been doing for the last 10 years and don't want to change, right? But when you have those active resistors to change, and this is something that businesses and business leaders need to recognize, is you have to think about the impact of those negative people or toxic people. They could be the smartest people in the room, but if they're not buying into a company-wide change initiative, what is the effect to your bottom line then, right? And a lot of companies that I worked with and for say, well, we can't get rid of them. I mean, the cost to hire is too much, but what's the cost of keeping them? And how does that affect your future aspirations? So you have to think about it in that way as well.
I liked it. You said it in a very subtle way, Zuleka. In fact, the active resistance are very often senior management The passive resistance are the mass. So the 1,000 employees that you have, but both pollute the realities of change. So in order to drive change, you have to onboard your senior management to role model this change. And you have to identify within the mass who can be the kind of, I don't want to use the word catalyst because I saw it in the presentation of Accenture and I want to, to park them. The early adopters, like the early adopters is as people that is excited by the change, who understand the business, who are not the ones saying, let's do this, but they will understand what it is for them in terms of the change, in terms of progress. And when you see these early adopters doing the change, believing that the change, then you have like this creation of fans, people that you are not paying to promote this, but they will talk positively about the change, and they will find ways to say, hey, this is what I get by changing what I'm doing in my day-to-day job. So that's two elements that are not costly, in fact, right? Role modeling.
Internal marketing is free, and you're getting buy-in without, it's not just a change team's responsibility or the IT team's responsibility or HR's. It's, you're making people accountable, and that kind of marketing is priceless. It's far more valuable than any other internal PR that you do for the change.
I would be careful to calling it marketing. It's more about influencing, but marketing has a connotation, and we have to be careful because I have seen organization using, I don't know, the Porter's model of change and really doing marketing, like nice videos that cost $20,000 to embark with the change, or doing like a team building exercise in a big resort, and they think that because of that change will happen. It's not a tactical stuff. It is something that it has to be sustainable. So it's more about influencing people to say, I want to be part of this change. And this happens when you know a little bit more of the psychology of human beings. And sometimes we don't need a degree for psychology. We just need to be self-reflective about what made us change ourselves for simple things in life, right?
100%.
So the thing that it has become clear is that the human aspect is super important, but how can we measure this this together with the transformation KPIs? Can we find ways of measuring how much we are progressing in terms of onboarding, engaging people, humans, in terms of change? How should you be measuring change? Is it revenue? Is it financial key performance indicators? What would you suggest for that, Zuleka?
You know, I think KPIs in themselves are a bit of a trap, right? Because it's quite easy for them to snowball, and then you start measuring everything and anything. You mentioned earlier, you talked about diversity and inclusion, and immediately what happens to your brain is you talk about gender parity and ethnic, but it's not like that, right? You have to look at how effective your structures are, right, to implement that change, right? Because the point is to maintain focus and accountability, right? And if something's not working, you have to be in a mindset where you can just learn fast and pivot, right? You mentioned bottom line. That's different metrics will appeal to different people, and I guess that's why you have to have a broad range. So things like ROI of the change and the bottom line are important to the C-suite and senior management generally, right? And then they'll look at things like, are we actually reducing cost? Are we actually more productive or agile, or is customer satisfaction still there? You know, those are all sort of key overarching, they're always important to a business and you can't discount them. But the things that people don't really look at is measuring the people side of change. We've talked throughout this whole discussion, we've talked about how important it is to get employees on board, but it's actually measuring that employee engagement throughout the process, right? So you say, are they still engaging with us on day one in the same way that, or more or less, as they are on day 90, right? And that is so important, because you don't look at it in terms of just a bottom line number. You say, well, 50% of our employees are positively engaging with us. And of that 50% on day 5, and of that optimistic, of that 50%, 10 are giving us active feedback that we're listening to. And again, that goes back to the point that I made earlier. Is this something that's going to make or break the change? So you can't have hard and fast KPIs that say, this is it. These are the only things we're going to measure the success of the project. You have to think about that agility that we talked about, the ability to look at the problem and say, well, wait, we're going in the wrong direction. We need to pivot. So you shouldn't have hard and fast KPIs in the traditional sense.
Totally, I completely agree, and then I'm reflecting a little bit more about how because there is a need of agility. So putting like hard financial outcomes, goals, or KPIs for the change is not enough, and the reason is that while you're doing the transformation, and if you're doing iterations, because you don't know a lot of things, and regardless of your seniority, I mean, you haven't lived through, you don't know the future. You have lived experience that gives you a little bit of gut feelings, intuition about what to expect, but you don't know the future. So what I like is that in the world of the entrepreneurial world of startups, then people do not use the big KPIs. They use more something called OKRs. It stands for Objective Key Results Initiatives. And what it does is that when we're talking about objectives, it's more about an inspiration in terms of the set direction that we want to be, like being the #1 customer satisfaction group in the Middle East. So it's where do I need to go in terms of key results? How do I know I'm getting there? What is the measurement that I'm going to be using? And behind this, you leave people the autonomy to create initiatives that are going to be supporting your objectives and be measured by your key results. So what will I do to get there? It is not something that you start with. It is something that you have the direction, but there is 10 million options that you could explore, and some of the options will not work, and you should not be afraid of failing. What you need is to fail fast. That means you have quickly to give it a try without investing time and too much money and resources and so on to investigate it. You don't even need to have like a market research company. Go and validate, like fake it until you make it, a little bit like startups are doing. Sometimes we validate the stuff with landing pages in order to develop a product that will cost us money and time. And you have this sense of urgency in the startup world that if you don't quickly validate your stuff, you are going to run out of money, and then you are out of business, and you will be part of the 90+% of companies who are failing. So you want to avoid that. So you are continuously experimenting, being in the level of experimentation. So instead of having hardcore numbers that as a direction or initiatives that are fixed, give them something that is inspirational, and let your teams build initiatives that can support that and give them the possibility to fail fast. Create the process of experimentation. Give them the $5,000 to say, how do we validate that? Experiment it quickly instead of going to SAP and spending $2 million. With that money, you're going to validate is what we are doing is the right approach.
I think there's, you mentioned that this works really well in the startup world, and usually because they're a bit more agile, they're smaller, they have that capacity to change things around. For a lot of more established companies, they always revert back to KPIs because they feel like it's something they can control. And with OKRs, it's not a case of not controlling, right? The difference is empowering your employees to come up with targets that are then defined. They're still targets, okay, but they're part of their day-to-day job, right? And those can be targets that shift slightly, right? Or the day-to-day activities can shift slightly to achieve that overarching goal or that overarching objective, right? So I think it's, again, a mindset change, right? If leaders were able to say to their employees, I want to be the best tech platform in wellness in the world, right? By 2023, how are we going to do it? And if you leave that to external consultants or just to a handful of your friends in the senior leadership team, you are not going to get the answers, right? If you let people engage, try, like you said, some of these initiatives, fail, and then work out what will work, you're much more likely to get there. And this goes back to the point that I made earlier as well. You don't necessarily create targets around these hard and fast KPIs. You create them around the structures. Are our structures more effective today and getting the most out of our employees today than they have been? And I think that sounds a lot more difficult because it's not, you can't pick up a book that says these are the 100 KPIs that you can measure your company again. But if you invest a little bit of time in that, you'll find that your business reaps a lot more rewards.
I think that is a fake, it is kind of an urban legend to say this approach of OKR is something that only for structures that are minimalistic. Let's look at Google. Okay, they are a tech, but are they really a startup anymore? They are still, in fact, I think that they co-created this approach of OKR, or they made it really awesome, functional. Facebook, Tata Consulting are using OKR in order to drive their business because they finally understood that you cannot have agility in your organizations if you have fixed ways of doing, like initiatives that are going to be your stuff for the next 12, 18 months. And so you need something that is more fluid and that has the capacity to be revisited and pivoted or kicked out as an initiative if it doesn't work. Encouraging in the, if you want, in the big initiative world, like in a corporation that hasn't changed, this is where you are afraid of failure because you know that, or voicing out that you are going to fail if you are doing this initiative, or hiding the results, or beautifying the results, because there is always an angle that you can show that your project worked. Yes, exactly. So we need to be able to allow people to talk about failure as about their failures as a way of constructing better organizations, and for that you need to allow them not to work anymore in long-term initiatives that are fixed, because it was the idea of the CEO or the COO or whoever that has a lot of power, and I'm afraid of saying, I couldn't make it. Maybe it didn't make sense from the beginning, but nobody was challenging. In organizations where during a transformation, you can talk openly about what works or not, this is where things work. Being candid about failure and saying, yeah, it doesn't work. It's not me. This is what it is. And that drives us to the discussion of saying, so how can we, I mean, let's imagine that this discussion has resonated with a couple of companies. And it's not about hiring consultants, it's more about how can I start really a transformation with things that are not going to cost me an arm and a leg, that is easy to implement. What are the key things that we can implement that is just about moving things around without extra costs? Is there a right way to start?
I think, look, I think the right way is a tailored way for each company. These, again, a complaint with the big companies, they come in with standard frameworks and structures that we then apply to, nice presentations that we just adapt to every company. For change, it doesn't work like that. I think the starting point always has to be, go back to basics. Everyone wants a quick win and wants to start with a process that let's start, moving things around here and then see if it works. It's not that simple. I think revisiting what your strategy is, what you're aiming to do as a business, and how that reflects in how you do your business and how well that resonates with your customers. And that's the more strategic side of it, right? You need someone to be able to say, you know, you're talking about, you know, collaboration, but there's no mechanisms of collaboration. You're talking about, you know, letting your employees decide X, Y, Z, but there's no way your employees can sit and share those ideas with you. Or even if they try, there's no way it gets to you, right? Because of the way your organization is structured. So you need to say, this is what you want, and this is how it does or does not make sense for your business. I think that's a starting point. And then from there, you can start looking at all the areas of your business, the quick wins and the long-term plan, right? And a huge part of that throughout the process, and this is something that I really champion at Cornerstone, is using your employees. You don't need to, as a consultant, you don't need to bring 1,000 consultants in to come and tell you what to do. You just need to get the best value out of the employees that you've already vetted, are happy with, they've been there for a while in a lot of cases. They know the job better than any consultant's going to know. And sometimes you need someone with, or a lot of times you need someone with an objective perspective that can come and get that kind of solution for you. And then, like you said,
let me give you, I love what you say, that everything starts by revisiting the culture. So what are the values that we are having and we want to have are not easy to be done or not easy to be understood. By the way, in many companies I have looked at the values, and I couldn't understand it. And I was wondering, how can it be possible that a newcomer, the secretary, or a manager can understand what it means behind? So because we as humans need to have like a behavior that is like
because
the example.
You know that because when you walk into a company, people are living it, right? You see it. It's senior management are not saying that, you know, let's all collaborate, and then they're having a closed door meeting over there with 5 people. Then I mean, obviously there are some conversations that need to stay at that level, but they're not sharing that with anyone else, right? Or not saying, giving you, we've seen this happen in the Middle East, right? Some senior managers will give you a job to do, but secretly they will give someone else a job to do, to see who comes out with the best outcome, because there's this divide and conquer mentality. But if on your website it says we champion collaboration and transparency and fairness, then you know that that's not happening. So when you walk into a company, I think people live it. They have to live it. And everything that the business has in place in terms of its systems and processes and structures has to reflect that, has to enable that.
Exactly. That's the word that I had in my mind. You stole it from my brain, Zuleka. Enablement. So to start any change, we have to understand what are the challenges to enable people to change. So if we want more collaboration, more innovation, whatever, what is preventing today? Is it the way we are communicating? It's not clear. Is it, like you say, we discussed with a bunch of senior management team, we have put some certain values and we publish in the website, and there is a 2-liners describing something like that is very subjective to understand. Why don't we open up the discussions about how can I represent it as an admin assistant, as a driver, as the person who is responsible for customer engagement, as a digital guy, the IT guy? How can I use it for my job? If there is no top-down approach in order to represent the behaviors, the actions behind the values, nobody cares. And if you don't reward these values and behaviors, then nobody cares. If we are talking about we are human-centric, and as a manager, my bonuses come from how much I have been selling every single month, and nothing to do with empowerment of my people, development of my people, of course, I'm not going to care, because I'm only judged about these sales key performance indicators. So it will not work. So culture, in order to start the change of culture, you don't need money, you need willingness. You need to start with the role modeling from your top management. You need to involve people into the discussions about how we can transform it into behaviors, and create. No, is try to identify the people who really feel overexcited, because they do the guerrilla approach for you. They do the job of showing others how things it should be. So the cultural aspect is so critical, and that is something that that in fact you have been working quite a lot, Zuleka, and you want to understand, if I and correct me if I'm wrong, you want to understand what is the perceptions and ways of implementing different business cultures, and you are running like a global survey to understand the different perceptions, and if there is something that can be done differently that is more targeted, because we have seen an evolution of the thinking. So if we as an individuals, we're changing and we're adapting about, is it my life worthwhile to go to work and crunch some numbers? Organizations are a mapping of a human being. So the organizations are also having these doubts and ways of going into evolution. And you want to understand where we stand. What is the perception? What counts for me? What is important? What is critical? Can you tell me a little bit more about?
And I think, you know, business culture is what we wanted to do with this survey is, again, from the top, right? It's not just a HR thing, right? It's across the business as a whole to understand what people, whether they're CEOs or whether they're frontline employees, how they perceive what business culture means to them, but how they perceive it's implemented in their companies. This goes back to the point that we mentioned before, right? Different parts of the business have a different idea of what business culture is. You might think you have a great business culture because you've got a great website that talks to the different values, but frontline employees won't see it that way. So one of the things that we want to do with this survey is to get an understanding of how people feel about it, how it's implemented in their organization. And the goal is then to bridge that gap, right? Look at what are the things that companies as a general rule need to have implemented in place to get that sense of business culture, because without a strong business culture, there's no strong results. Even if you have like hard and fast KPIs, it will teeter off at some point, because you can't survive in this current economic climate with quite a stagnant and static business culture. It's just not going to work. So yeah, we wanted to get the perceptions of, we're running a global survey because we wanted to get quite a diverse perspective from different companies, different industries, different employee levels, so that we can come up with a solution that we're looking to share with everyone through some infographics and white papers. So yes, please get involved, because the more ideas and responses that we have, the better that we can help businesses and make a big difference.
You know what I like is that one, I did the survey, so I went through the process to. It's very short to do, to be done. The second thing is that it will allow whoever is responding to have a benchmark and have a comparison. Where do I stand? So if I'm thinking like this, how companies in the UAE or in France are reacting towards the change? Is it different, so that we can know where we stand, and if we need to do the first step towards adapting to what is going on?
And it gives you an opportunity at the end. I mean, we have what we've created an exclusive LinkedIn community where more of these ideas will be shared. And so you'll connect with people and hopefully have key takeaways that you can take away and implement in your own businesses, or share ideas with your business leaders to say, this is the direction we should be going in.
So if I fill up then the survey, then I have access not only to the benchmark, but access to the group in order to discuss ideas. And this is
and to network, yeah.
If you have challenges, there is always someone who went through this challenge who can tell you a different perspective. There is no better way to move forward. Listen, we are running towards the end of this discussion, and I wanted to ask you, is there something specific, like a key message that you would like to share with the audience about change that you feel that is super important to take into consideration? What could be your takeaway, Zuleka?
I think my key takeaway is that, you know, you have to understand that you cannot dehumanize a business. People are a huge factor in the success of a change or transformation project. It's not HR or a change team thing. It's a whole of business effort. And it really requires a much more nuanced approach to help you get there. I think that would be my key takeaway. There's no hard and fast rules for change and transformation. You really have to look at your business on its own merits.
In my case, so what I think I have taken that out of our discussion is that you cannot do a transformation if the human aspect, if you don't start with the human aspect. In fact,
yes,
it's not about tools, new processes. It is because they will be the bottleneck if you don't do the effort for the change. So the human aspect, and how can you make it, instead of being a one-off, a tactical, a transactional thing that you did, it is more about a sustainable, something that lasts forever, that you create a mindset in the organization so that it's not like a company shouldn't be like you have waves of transformation. It should be continuously transforming in order to be more agile. And it starts with humans, because what is valid for us, if it is super difficult for us to go to the gym, a minor change compared to a big ass transformation in organizations. Imagine if an organization is a mapping of a human being, it should be, there is friction, there is fear, there is resistance that needs to be overcome. If you want to reach out to Zuleka Kaysan, so I'm going to spell it Kaysan. LinkedIn is the way to go, right?
Yes. I mean, just drop me a message on LinkedIn. We can schedule a short call and take it from there. There's only one Zuleka Kaysan on LinkedIn, so it shouldn't be difficult to find.
That is good, Zuleka. Really, I find it quite insightful insightful and reassuring, because a lot of the mentality, the philosophy of change that you are implementing in the Cornerstone Advisory is very similar to what we do from just a slightly different angle, but I would say it is more than the angle, it's a complementarity of what we do. Two ways of contributing to make organizations that are thriving in the change, that know how to make it happen. So that's something excellent. Zuleka, thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.